Interestingly, I'm thinking about when my dad actually used the word tinnitus, and he's had some hearing loss, and he talked about having hearing loss all the way back from his college days. And I remember him using the words or the word tinnitus maybe when I was in a high school, so around the 80s. And I wonder how that corroborates with that word even becoming a part of the lexicon, when the word was starting to be used. He talked about having a constant ringing in his ears, and he was always very good about going to the doctor and trying to suss things out. But at the beginning, it felt as though there were no answers, and it was incredibly frustrating for him. He mostly kept it to himself, and it felt as though it would come up when there was an intense frustration and an anger around it, and he would I remember him saying, "I don't think you understand. There is a constant ringing in my ears," and much more forceful than I just put it, as though he just had it, and we didn't understand, and we couldn't understand. Absolutely, I feel as though it contributed to a frustration level at home, and certainly when there are multi-sensory things happening, and, his work very much related to being able to take information in, hear it, and respond. Um, that need for ultimate quiet, it could never be satisfied. Not understanding how someone you love is suffering. In hindsight, I feel heartbroken, really, that I wasn't able to understand, why my dad had to have the TV on so loud, or the various things that he needed to feel that he could experience the world with us. And we would come over and the TV would be blaring, or, and it was uncomfortable for all of us as well, but we never discussed how can we be together in this space and and acknowledge what dad was going through even with my children. You know, we kind of made fun in a way of how loud the TV was, and, vibrating, and just now when I think about it, it just makes my heart break, really, to know he was such a lover of learning and a lover of the world, and to be, such a huge obstacle in his ability to be in the world in that way. Um, it's heartbreaking in hindsight, and like so many people, I think, he might have attributed it to hearing loss coupled with tinnitus, and attempting to solve these issues with hearing aids and all these other extremely expensive procedures and doctors and all these things, and not coming up with any answers. Um, yeah, and again, in hindsight, I wish, we had talked about it and read about it together. Um, but at that time, it just there wasn't a lot of information about what it was. Oh, it's funny. I brought this picture. Is it all right if I hold it up? I just have it right next to me because I thought I knew that. Can you see that? So it's kind of got some reflection going on. Yeah. All shows my dad was on. It's hilarious. I mean, I think he was on every sitcom, detective, everything back in the day. He was. I know that he was nervous about it. It's funny because I remember him there was always just an absolute joy that I saw in him when he was working. But as time progressed, it felt as though he was getting more and more uncomfortable about the prospect of working, which, with the aging process and certainly in the world of show business, it's complicated. Aging is complicated. We could go on. But I felt that he would come home sometimes and we'd talk a little bit, and he would go on about, I can't fucking hear and I can't focus. And I'm pretty sure he never told anybody. Because even when he was on Malcolm in the Middle, much more recently than What's Up Doc, or I mean, golly, so many of his movies. I feel that it's just so interesting. You show up as an artist on a project, and just the very mere getting the job, is humongous. And then you get there. I mean, I know from my own experience, which was totally different than my dad's, I'm sure, but it's, we still don't want to make a wave or make things difficult for anyone else, because I know for me, I feel like, well, there are a lot of people who do this job. He was doing a play in LA at one time, and I felt as though he had a huge line load. And I remember talking to him about the kind of focus that's necessary for that kind of project. And I think that his frustration level really grew with himself, unfortunately, because he wasn't telling anyone. And so I remember that distinctly, and especially being on stage, there's no take two. Breaks my heart that I didn't think about how much that was impacting his ability to feel comfortable to go to work. He was struggling with it so much that he just decided he wouldn't do anything anymore. He wouldn't work anymore. And I remember, again, aging, right? And I wonder if tinnitus hadn't have been a problem for him, or one of the things that was plaguing him, if he would have felt more able to go to work, or if, and as we talk more and more about being an inclusive community of artists where all folks are welcome, people are welcome as they are, you know, I just don't think my dad was able, even if in some contexts it was true, we welcome you as you are, to fully be vulnerable. I don't I don't think he might have believed it, you know, because it is, how do you attempt to embrace an artist who is struggling with hearing? I mean, how do you do it? Now, as an artist myself, I think there are myriad ways to embrace an individual in that way. Um, but maybe time wasn't my dad's friend, in that he was born into a time when actors just mostly appeared very able and very beautiful and, perfect. I think it was pure resilience and his desire to learn about what it was. My dad, whether it was research for a role, reading books, learning about science, he was tenacious as all get out. And I think he knowledge and learning was his friend. Um, he read voraciously. He kept up on all the latest discoveries, spoke to doctors. That gave him hope, although it really never gave him that much relief. Toward the end of his life, I sensed a shift from that man with that perfection at the front. I sensed um a softening into acceptance of the world that he lived in or his own experience of the world. And I think he would be so happy. Happy is the wrong word. I think he would be at peace with the idea of individuals talking and sharing how tinnitus has impacted their lives and how they could make something wonderful and probably funny, knowing my dad, about it so that it wasn't some elephant in the room, you know? Um, he was so creative, he had that character, William W.D. Bud Prize, and he wore this chin guard, which was, it was to correct an underbite. And so I would imagine, he might create a character that had tinnitus and was living in the world as it was for him. I would have been so fascinated, and I wish I had asked him, and certainly I can ask other friends of mine, you included, my friend Bill Fennelly, you know, living with tinnitus is something that we should all know about so we can have love and compassion for all of our colleagues and our fellow humans.